The water stain was no bigger than a quarter. Catherine Morrison stood frozen in her bathroom doorway that Wednesday morning in March 2025, staring at the pale discoloration on the white shower curtain. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. The morning sun streaming through the frosted window illuminated the spot like a spotlight on a stage. And in that moment, Catherine wasn't a 72-year-old grandmother in suburban Detroit. She was 17 again, standing in a hospital corridor, watching orderlies wheel two sheet-covered gurneys past her. Her arthritic hands trembled as she reached for the curtain. The pain that shot through her swollen knuckles barely registered. Nothing mattered except that stain. That tiny, innocent-looking mark that her brain insisted was the beginning of something terrible. Something that grew. Something that killed. Catherine's husband Michael appeared behind her, coffee mug in hand, his gray hair still disheveled from sleep. They'd been married 45 years, and he recognized the signs immediately. The rigid posture, the shallow breathing, the way her fingers clutched at the doorframe. "Kathy, it's just water," he said gently, not for the first time, not for the 1,000th time. She didn't respond. Couldn't respond, because it was never just water. Water meant moisture. Moisture meant darkness. Darkness meant growth, and growth meant death. Her mind was already calculating how long had that stain been there. Hours? Days? Had the spores already released into the air? Were they breathing them in right now? She grabbed the edge of the shower curtain with both hands and yanked. The plastic rings clattered against the rod as she tore it down. Michael stepped back, spilling coffee on his robe. He'd stopped trying to intervene years ago. Stopping her only made it worse. The panic attacks could last hours. Catherine dragged the curtain to the bathroom floor and dropped to her knees. Every joint in her body screamed in protest. Her doctor had warned her 3 months ago. The constant scrubbing, the hours spent kneeling on hard floors, the repetitive motions, they were destroying what was left of her mobility. She was developing osteoarthritis in her spine now, joining the already severe arthritis in her hands and knees. But what choice did she have? She couldn't stop. She'd never been able to stop, not since the winter of 1969. As her raw, reddened hands worked the scrub brush back and forth across the plastic, her mind did what it always did during these episodes. It went back. Back to the basement apartment on Stratford Avenue. Back to the smell. That thick, musty odor she'd thought was just old building dampness. Back to her mother Helen's hoarding, the mountains of newspapers from the 1950s, the broken furniture stacked to the ceiling, the boxes of clothes no one would ever wear. Back to little Jenny, her 9-year-old sister, coughing through another night. But here's what Catherine had never told anyone, not even Michael. Not in 45 years of marriage. She'd known. Deep down, some part of her teenage brain had known something was terribly wrong with that basement. She'd seen the black patches spreading across the walls behind the newspaper stacks. She'd smelled something besides old paper and mildew. Something organic and wrong. She'd heard Jenny's cough getting worse, month after month. And she'd done nothing. She'd spent her time at her friend Susan's house, or at the library, or anywhere but that suffocating basement apartment. She'd escaped, and her mother and sister had died. Wait, before we go further, you need to understand something crucial about what killed them. Because Catherine spent 56 years thinking she could have prevented it, when the truth was far more complex than a 17-year-old could have grasped. The villain in this story had a scientific name: Stachybotrys chartarum, black mold, toxic mold. It's a species of fungus that produces mycotoxins, poisonous compounds that, in high concentrations and prolonged exposure, can cause severe respiratory illness, particularly in children and people with weakened immune systems. It thrives in dark, damp places with cellulose-based materials to feed on: paper, wood, drywall. It needs moisture content above 55% and poor ventilation. In other words, it needs exactly what the Morrison family's basement apartment provided. The winter of 1968-69 was brutal in Detroit. Temperatures dropped below zero for weeks at a time. The old building on Stratford Avenue had outdated heating and poor insulation. Helen Morrison, a compulsive hoarder since the death of her own mother years earlier, had packed the three-room basement apartment with decades of accumulated possessions. The narrow windows, barely above ground level, were blocked by piles of boxes. Air couldn't circulate. Heat couldn't distribute evenly. Condensation formed on the cold concrete walls, soaked into the newsprint and cardboard, and created a perfect breeding ground. Jenny had asthma. That's what the doctors thought at first when Helen brought her to Detroit General Hospital in October 1968, after the girl couldn't stop coughing. They prescribed an inhaler, sent her home, told Helen it was probably just the cold weather aggravating her condition. By December, Jenny was coughing up blood. Helen herself had developed a chronic cough and fatigue. The doctors did chest x-rays, saw shadows on both their lungs, and finally asked the right questions. Where did they live? What were the conditions? Had there been water damage? A city inspector visited the basement apartment on January 8, 1969. He walked into that suffocating space, pushed aside a tower of newspapers, and found entire walls coated with slimy, greenish-black growth. The air quality test results came back days later. Dangerous levels of Stachybotrys spores, over 10,000 colony-forming units per cubic meter of air. Normal indoor air has fewer than 200. The apartment was immediately condemned. Helen and Jenny were admitted to the hospital. Frank Morrison, who worked night shifts at the Ford plant and barely spent time in the apartment, tested negative for significant exposure. Catherine, who'd spent most of the previous 6 months avoiding home, showed only mild symptoms. The diagnosis was chronic mycotoxicosis, poisoning from prolonged mold toxin exposure. Jenny's young lungs, already compromised by asthma, couldn't recover from the damage. She died on January 29, 1969, from acute respiratory failure. Helen, whose exposure had been daily and intense for years, developed a secondary infection that her weakened immune system couldn't fight. She died February 14, 1969, Valentine's Day. Catherine remembered that detail with perfect, horrible clarity. In the immediate aftermath, Catherine didn't break down. She moved mechanically through the funerals, the legal proceedings, the relocation to a small apartment she shared with her father. She finished her senior year of high school with perfect attendance. She started working as a secretary at an insurance office. She met Michael Morrison, no relation, at a church social in 1971. They married in 1972. She seemed fine. She appeared to have processed her grief in a healthy way. Even Frank, lost in his own trauma and guilt, thought his daughter had somehow come through intact. But the cracks were already forming. Catherine just hid them well. The first sign came 3 months after the wedding. She'd moved into Michael's small house, and one morning she noticed a water spot on the bathroom ceiling. a tiny leak from the upstairs neighbor's bathroom. Michael called the landlord, who promised to fix it. Meanwhile, Catherine couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening for dripping sounds. She checked the spot every hour. When a small patch of paint bubbled and peeled, revealing darker plaster beneath, something snapped in her brain. She remembered Jenny's last labored breaths. She remembered her mother's confusion as the infection ravaged her brain. And she understood with perfect, terrifying clarity. This was going to happen again unless she stopped it. Michael came home from work that day to find Catherine on a stepladder with a screwdriver tearing down the ceiling. She'd pulled down 6 square feet of plaster, revealing the pipes above. Chunks of ceiling littered the bathroom floor. White dust covered everything. Catherine stood among the debris, wild-eyed, explaining that she had to see if there was mold in the walls. She had to make sure they were safe. Michael, young and in love, and not yet understanding the depth of her trauma, had laughed nervously and helped her clean up. The landlord fixed the leak. They patched the ceiling. Catherine slowly settled down. But she didn't stop checking. Every day, multiple times a day, she inspected that bathroom ceiling. Then she started checking the other rooms. Then she created a schedule. Monday, kitchen deep clean. Tuesday, living room. Wednesday, bathroom. Thursday, bedroom. Friday, second pass on everything. Weekends for carpet and windows. Michael thought she was just being thorough. Lots of young wives took pride in keeping a clean home, right? The real problem emerged after their daughter, Amanda, was born in 1982. Catherine looked at that tiny, perfect baby and felt a terror so profound she couldn't articulate it. Every surface in Amanda's nursery became a potential threat. Every toy had to be sterilized. The humidifier, necessary for dry Michigan winters, had to be emptied and refilled daily, cleaned weekly with bleach, because standing water could grow bacteria, and bacteria could make babies sick, and sick babies could die. Here's what happens when trauma-based OCD intersects with new parenthood. The compulsions expand to fill every available hour. Catherine's cleaning schedule doubled, then tripled. Amanda wasn't allowed to sit on the floor. It might be dirty, even though Catherine had just scrubbed it. Visitors had to remove their shoes, wash their hands, sometimes change into clean clothes Catherine provided. Michael's parents stopped visiting after Catherine asked them to shower before holding their granddaughter. Friends drifted away. Amanda grew up in a house that felt more like a hospital than a home. Yet somehow Catherine managed to keep working part-time, keep Amanda fed and clothed and educated. The obsession was contained, barely. It wasn't until Amanda left for college in 2000 that things truly spiraled out of control. Without the structure of caring for her daughter, Catherine's entire existence narrowed to a single focus: preventing contamination. The house became her full-time project. Every surface gleamed. Furniture was covered in plastic. The smell of bleach and disinfectant permeated every room. Michael begged her to talk to someone, but Catherine couldn't explain. How could she make him understand that she wasn't crazy? She was vigilant. She'd failed once. She couldn't fail again. Now, in 2025, kneeling on her bathroom floor with arthritic hands, scrubbing a shower curtain for the 3rd hour straight, Catherine understood she was dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, but dying nonetheless. The constant exposure to cleaning chemicals had given her chronic bronchitis, an ironic mirror of the respiratory illness that had killed her family. Her doctor had been blunt last month. Stop using harsh chemicals or the lung damage would become permanent. But how could she stop? Switching to gentler cleaners felt like leaving the door unlocked, the windows open, an invitation to disaster. The phone rang. Catherine ignored it, kept scrubbing. Her hands were bleeding now, the skin cracked and raw from both the arthritis and the chemical exposure. The phone stopped, then immediately rang again. Michael answered in the other room. Catherine heard his tone change from casual to excited. She looked up from the curtain. Michael appeared in the bathroom doorway, his face bright with a smile that made him look 20 years younger. But there was caution in his eyes, too. He knew what he was about to say would trigger his wife. Still, this was important. This was their daughter. "That was Amanda," he said carefully. "She has news." Catherine's hand stilled. She waited. "She's pregnant. 3 months along. Everything's healthy." Michael's smile widened, then faltered as he watched Catherine's face drain of color. "And she wants to move back here for a while after the baby's born. She wants our help. She wants the baby to know us." The bathroom tilted. Catherine's vision narrowed to a pinpoint. She was 17 again, watching those gurneys roll past. She was 25 again, sterilizing bottles at 3 a.m. while Michael slept. She was 72, and her pregnant daughter wanted to bring a vulnerable infant into this house, where water stains appeared on shower curtains, where mold could grow in hidden spaces, where people died from invisible threats. "No," Catherine whispered. "What?" Michael stepped closer. "No, she can't. It's not safe." Catherine's voice rose. "You don't understand. There are spores. In the air. In the walls. I saw a stain this morning. It could be spreading. If the baby comes here—" "Kathy, stop." Michael's voice was firm now, edged with 45 years of accumulated frustration. "Look at yourself. You're on your knees, bleeding, scrubbing a water stain that's been there for maybe 12 hours. This isn't keeping anyone safe. This is—" He stopped himself, but she heard the unspoken word. "Crazy." Catherine looked down at her hands, blood mixed with soapy water, diluting across the white plastic. Her knuckles were so swollen she could barely make a fist. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a full night's sleep that wasn't interrupted by the need to check something, clean something, make something safe. She couldn't remember the last time she and Michael had gone out to dinner because she couldn't eat food prepared in kitchens she hadn't personally inspected. She couldn't remember the last time Amanda had visited without making excuses to leave early. But none of that mattered, did it? Because she was alive. Michael was alive. Amanda was alive. That's what mattered. She'd kept them safe, except, and here's where the story shifts, she hadn't kept them safe at all. She'd driven them away. Amanda's last visit had been 6 months ago. 6 months. Her only child, and Catherine couldn't even remember the last real conversation they'd had that wasn't dominated by cleaning complaints or defensive explanations. Michael slept in the guest room, most nights now, because Catherine needed the bedroom completely dark and sealed to prevent dust accumulation, needed to get up every few hours to check for moisture or insects or any sign of threat. Her vigilance had created exactly what she'd feared. A house where nothing alive could comfortably exist. That realization should have been a turning point. In a conventional story, this is where Catherine would break down, seek help, begin recovery. But real trauma doesn't resolve on convenient timelines. Catherine simply added a new compulsion to her list, preparing Amanda's old bedroom for the baby. She spent the next 2 weeks stripping wallpaper, scrubbing every inch of the room with industrial-strength chemicals, installing a specialized air filtration system she ordered online. The arthritis in her spine got worse. She couldn't turn her neck without pain. She didn't care. Amanda came to visit in April, 6 months pregnant now, glowing with that particular luminescence of healthy pregnancy. Catherine met her at the door with a bottle of hand sanitizer and a list of protocols. Don't touch the walls. She just treated them with antifungal spray. Don't open windows. Outside air could carry mold spores. Don't use the bathroom on the second floor. There was a small leak she was monitoring. Amanda stood on the porch holding a small duffel bag, looking at her mother. Really looking. Maybe for the first time in years. She saw the gray hair that had thinned from stress. The gaunt face from meals skipped in favor of cleaning. The bloodshot eyes from nights without real sleep. The trembling hands. "Mom," Amanda said slowly, "when's the last time you left the house?" Catherine blinked. Thursday. No, wait. That was Michael. He went to the store. I needed to stay, and she trailed off, trying to remember. When had she last gone outside? Weeks? Months? "Let me see the nursery," Amanda said, not unkindly. She stepped into the house, noting the plastic covers on furniture, the smell of chemicals sharp enough to sting her nostrils, the unnatural shine of surfaces clean beyond any reasonable need. Catherine led her upstairs, pride fighting with anxiety. The room was perfect, sterile, every corner scrubbed, every potential threat eliminated. She'd installed special moisture-resistant paint, sealed every crack, placed dehumidifiers in all 4 corners. It looked like a room in a medical facility. Amanda walked to the center of the room and slowly turned, taking it all in. Then she placed one hand on her belly and said quietly, "I can't bring my baby here." The words punched through Catherine's chest. "What? But I've made it safe. Look at, it's not safe, Mom." Amanda's voice cracked. "The chemicals. Can you smell them? That's not healthy for a baby, for anyone." She looked directly at her mother. "This room will make my baby sick." Catherine felt the world tilt again. But this time, something different happened. Instead of defending, instead of explaining, instead of spiraling into panic, she heard her daughter's words like an echo across 56 years. "This room will make my baby sick." The basement apartment made Jenny sick. The spores, the toxins, the invisible threats. But what was Catherine filling this room with? Different toxins, different poisons, trying so hard to prevent one kind of sickness that she'd created another. "I need to tell you something," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. And for the first time, she told Amanda the whole story. Not just the facts, that her grandmother and aunt had died when Catherine was 17, but the details. The guilt, the conviction that she could have saved them if she'd only paid attention, only cleaned, only cared enough. The terror that followed her into every home, every room, every relationship. The 56 years of trying to scrub away a tragedy that no amount of cleaning could erase. Amanda listened, tears streaming down her face. When Catherine finished, her daughter asked one simple question. "Mom, you were 17. How was any of that your fault?" Catherine had no answer, because of course it wasn't. A teenage girl couldn't have stopped her mother's mental illness, couldn't have detected toxic mold without proper testing equipment, couldn't have treated her sister's compromised lungs, couldn't have known what she didn't know. The city inspector with specialized training and equipment had needed laboratory analysis to confirm the contamination. A child couldn't have saved them. But knowing that, intellectually and feeling it emotionally, are two entirely different things. Catherine had carried survivor's guilt for 5.5 decades, had let it metastasize into obsessive-compulsive disorder, had sacrificed her health and relationships on the altar of impossible prevention. And it had taken her pregnant daughter, standing in a room saturated with chemical fumes, to make her see what she'd become. "Will you talk to someone?" Amanda asked. "A therapist who specializes in trauma?" Catherine looked at her bleeding, aching hands, thought about the chronic bronchitis, the insomnia, the isolation, thought about the grandson or granddaughter growing inside Amanda's belly, a baby she might never really know if she continued like this. "Yes," she said, and meant it. The treatment wasn't quick or easy. Catherine learned that trauma-based OCD requires specialized therapy, exposure, and response prevention, cognitive behavioral therapy adapted for her specific triggers. She learned that black mold, while dangerous in extreme conditions like her childhood home, is relatively rare in well-maintained buildings with normal humidity levels. She learned that the chemicals she'd been using daily were as harmful as the threats she imagined she was preventing. She learned that her sister's death was a tragedy, not a lesson about eternal vigilance. She learned that you can honor the dead without trying to resurrect them through compulsion. But here's the part that matters most for anyone listening to this story, particularly those in their 60s, 70s, 80s, who might recognize themselves in Catherine's journey. Recovery isn't failure. Accepting help isn't weakness. And the brain can develop new patterns even after decades of reinforcing destructive ones. The day Amanda brought baby Emma home from the hospital, Catherine held her granddaughter with trembling hands. Not from fear this time, from joy mixed with manageable anxiety. The room wasn't perfectly sterile. There was dust on the bookshelf. The windows were open, letting in spring air. And Emma, healthy and perfect, slept peacefully in her grandmother's arms. Catherine still had hard days. Moments when she saw a stain and felt the old panic rising. But now she had tools, breathing exercises, cognitive reframing, and most importantly, the phone number of her therapist and her support group. She'd learned that safety isn't the absence of all possible threats. That's impossible. Safety is being able to handle normal risks with appropriate caution rather than paralyzing fear. Michael, sitting beside her as she rocked Emma, took her hand. The wedding ring she'd worn for 45 years caught the afternoon light. "You did it," he said softly. Catherine shook her head. "I'm doing it. Present tense. One day at a time. And that, ultimately, is what matters. Not that we overcome trauma completely, but that we refuse to let it steal our entire lives."